For almost 2 decades now, the BMW X1 has been the entry point into the crossover lineup from BMW, giving buyers an opportunity to purchase a luxury crossover that gives them something a bit more than what you're going to find from mainstream manufacturers. Obviously, with the X1, it's not going to rival an X5 or X7 when it pertains to performance, quality, refinement, and just the cachet of the BMW badge. However, in the luxury subcompact crossover market, the BMW X1 is giving you quite a bit in regards to the overall driving experience and ownership experience. What they've done for this new generation is give you a vehicle that does look like a smaller X3, but also there's some other attributes and qualities that I think a lot of you are going to like and enjoy. And in today's video, we're going to check out the BMW X1 for 2025. Check out the exterior, the interior, take it out for a test drive, and see why, if you are looking at buying a luxury subcompact crossover right now, you want a vehicle that is fun to drive, that does feel somewhat sporty, but also has cutting-edge technology, then maybe taking a look at the BMW X1 might be a great decision. Now, before we get in this video, I want to give a huge shout and thank you to Herb Chambers BMW Sudbury in Sudbury, Massachusetts for letting me come down here to check out the BMW X1. Their link will be in the description below, so you can check out their extensive BMW inventory. So as usual, let's begin with pricing. For 2025 with the X1, you're looking at a starting cost of right around $42,000, which is highly competitive against the Audi Q3, Mercedes Benz GLA, and Volvo XC40. Now, some of you will be pointing out that with the Q3, you can get one below 40 grand. But keep in mind, that's the 40 TFSI model with only 184 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque. Now, I understand why Audi did that, because they can undercut their closest rivals, but that powertrain will leave a lot more to be desired. So you might want to keep that in mind when you are cross-shopping the Q3 with the X1. You'll have to go with the 45 TFSI to receive a vehicle that is enjoyable to drive. With the X1, though, for 2025 and this particular generation, it's all about the size. What BMW has done to this model is that they have upsized it quite a bit, and it does reflect with the design too. So it kind of looks like a baby X3, which now also, of course, the X3 has been refreshed, so it doesn't look as modern as the new BMW X3, but I think you are going to like the size of this model now, with it being an inch longer, an inch wider, and about 2 inches higher than last generation. Now, speaking of the design for the X1, it does take a lot of its styling cues from other crossovers in the lineup. You see that with the headlight design, but also just the front fascia in general. So you will receive full LED headlights, which does give you a more upscale look to this model. One thing I do like, though, about our X1 that we have here today is the contrasting accents. So there will be brushed aluminum outlining the kidney grills and the lower portion of the front bumper. And better yet, and this is one thing I really do like to see in this market, some people might disagree, is that there will be a full paint finish, although it's going to be in a gloss black look. So I do like the two-tone color option that we have here on this model today. Also, one thing I do like to see, especially for a base trim or an entry model into the lineup, is the functional side air curtains, which will help out with the aerodynamics of this model. So it's not just a block here. You can actually enjoy this vehicle on some winding back roads for sure. Also, nice touch for this generation is that you do have striking body lines on the hood, and it does give you a youthful and sportier look to this model than in the past. Taking a look at the side profile, our model is sitting on 18-inch alloy wheels, and I have to say this will be the optimal choice for the X1 because road noise and ride comfort is pretty good for a vehicle in this market. Obviously, it's not going to ride like an X7, so you're gonna have to keep your expectations to a reasonable minimum, but I do think you're gonna love how this vehicle performs on some bumpier roads, and just even on the highway. Road noise isn't necessarily too bad with these tires, but we'll talk about that later on when we take this vehicle out for a test drive. Also, of course, you're gonna notice the gloss black trim that outlines the wheel wells. Nice classy touch on our model. You're also going to receive color matched side mirror caps with turn signal indicators to go along with blind spot detection for added safety. Then as you make your way around to the back for 2025, nothing new here aesthetically, but once again, it does take a lot of the styling elements from other crossovers in the lineup. I kind of see some X5 here with the taillight design, which is also LED. You're also going to notice that you do have a sportier roofline too, so it's not going to be like the X2, but you are going to have a bit more of an aerodynamic look to this crossover. Then for the lower portion of the rear bumper, you're going to notice the brushed aluminum once again, and the gloss black accents tying everything together on this model. So if you're looking for a vehicle that does look upscale, not rugged, you want a crossover that doesn't have any of that plastic cladding, you're definitely going to like the X1 for 2025. And while we're taking a look at the rear fascia, might as well check out the cargo area for 2025. So with the X1, you are going to receive a power liftgate. And inside, behind the second row seats, you're looking at right around 25.7 cubic feet of room, which this right here is why upsizing this model has been very beneficial for BMW, because a lot of luxury subcompact crossovers are just that. They're too small, they're not family friendly, they're not even the most practical. But at 25.7, this could rival some compact crossovers like an Alfa Romeo Stelvio and Mercedes Benz GLA. So keep all of that in mind. For $42,000, you're getting a more spacious crossover. That makes it quite a great value, just in my opinion. Now, this would outclass the Audi Q3 and also the Mercedes Benz GLA. So if practicality is what you're looking for, you're going to find that here with the X1. Then with the second row seats folded, you're looking at right on 57 cubic feet of room. And again, that would be close to the top in this market. So if you are looking for a vehicle that is not going to break the bank, you want the interior space, this might be a great choice. Also, if you're somebody who likes what the X3 is offering, but you don't want to spend over 50 grand, the X1 does make a compelling case for itself. Also on the left side of the rear cargo area, you will have some netting for some smaller items, such as a couple water bottles, car detail equipment, or maybe even a first aid kit. Beneath the floor mat on our model, we do get a spare tire, so if you encounter a flat on your road trips or travels, you can fix that and be back on the road. Hopping inside the BMW X1 we have today, we're greeted by power adjustable and heated Vaganza upholstery seats for both the driver and passenger, with the driver's side having 2-position memory for added convenience. Now, some of you might be wondering, oh, it's Vaganza leather, is it going to feel comfortable or plush? I think it does, especially when you're comparing this to the Sensitech seats that BMW was producing last generation and last decade. Because what you have here with the vegan leather, it does feel very authentic. Compared to other vehicles in this market, it has a nice plush feel to it. Also, what BMW does to their seats, they give you more of a sportier experience. So you're going to have a decent amount of bolstering and support. So on those longer drives, when you are in the corners and twists and bends, you won't be swinging around too much. I do like that here for this model. But for the BMW X1 for this generation, it's all about the technology here. Because just like we saw with the X3, you are going to have a conjoined screen for your digital gauge cluster and infotainment system, which is the iDrive 9 user interface. That is also Android-based, by the way, and we'll talk about that later on. But with the digital gauge cluster, and we have seen this in other models such as the X3, the resolution and quality is a lot better than earlier BMWs in the 2020s, where you are going to have some better accents here. It's not going to be as difficult to read. Also, I like too is that it's more intuitive, because the older BMWs with the digital gauge cluster, it was rather static and just really wasn't competitive to what you have with Audi and Mercedes Benz right now. But just like with the X3, you will have different layouts to choose from. You can also showcase different types of content that is more relevant to you, such as your navigation map. Now, we do have the technology package equipped on our model today, giving us a head-up display, and that is a must-have, I personally feel, because it'll keep your eyes on the road ahead of you rather than looking down at that digital gauge cluster. Also, when you do place the X1 in different drive modes, the background of the digital gauge cluster does change colors, so it does give you more of an interactive experience than in prior model years. And taking a look at the user interface, if you are familiar with the iDrive 7 and iDrive 8 infotainment systems, you're going to find yourself right at home with this screen. Although there is some major differences here for the X1 that you're not going to find in the X3. And this does emulate the Q3 to a certain degree, and I don't think BMW should try mimicking what Audi has. So for the head unit itself, you are going to notice quick access icons on the left side of the screen for your back button, media, phone, and navigation map. Now you're also going to notice that there aren't physical buttons or dials for the dual zone climate control, heated front seats, or heated steering wheel. And we're seeing a lot more of that in the BMW lineup and family, so that will take some time to get used to. But for me, the main takeaway for the X1 and X2 is that you have this floating bridge here. It's not really a center console, so it definitely tells you that this is an X1 and not a vehicle built on the cluster architecture platform. But for this floating bridge, there's no quick access buttons and there's no rotary dial. So this is only a touchscreen. I wish BMW still gave you dual functionality with the iDrive 9 user interface inside the X1, that would go a long way and would be easier to use, especially when you have your menu layout here with all your widgets in place. You don't really want to be reaching for that screen, but you're going to have to access different menus, and that to me is a huge drawback. On the floating bridge though, you will find your start-stop button, your camera systems, also your drive mode selector, then your volume and tuning buttons. So very straightforward stuff here. The screen itself though is very responsive, I have to say. The Android-based head unit is very similar to what you had a couple generations ago for the iDrive 7 and iDrive 8. So I do think a lot of you are going to like what you have here to work with inside a vehicle under $50,000. I just think though that without the rotary dial, this is going to be a bit more difficult to use on a daily basis. Just my take. For your camera systems though, you are going to have a front-facing camera with trajectory, a rear backup camera with trajectory, and a top view camera as well. So you will have a lot of vision here when you are backing in a tight spot or parking on a city street. Also, because we do have the technology package, we do receive the 3D view camera. And I do think going with the tech package is the way to go, especially just for a vehicle in 2025. You want to have some of these creature comforts and tech features that I think is definitely going to help if you do live in the city and suburbs and you constantly park on city streets. This will give you a lot more assurance when you are backing out of those spots. For the rest of the interior, you will notice two buttons on the passenger side for your front and rear defrosters. Then moving towards the center console itself, you will find a wireless phone charging pad, two cup holders, two USB-C inputs, and then for this floating bridge, you will have some storage beneath the bridge itself, but you'll also find another storage compartment for maybe a couple pens, maybe some loose change, but that's basically it. Then to round out the front seating area, available for the X1 and equipped on our model, we do receive a panoramic moonroof, which will bring in a lot of natural light to the interior. Then for passengers in the second row, they're greeted by around 37 inches of legroom, which is better than the Audi Q3, but actually an inch less than the Mercedes Benz GLA. Now keep in mind with the GLA, you're not going to have a high roof line. So if you do have taller passengers sitting in the back at all times, they will not be hitting their head on the headliner, especially in the X1 because of the fact that BMW did add a bit more height to this vehicle. Better yet, you can also recline these seats a bit by about 5 degrees, I would say, and that will maximize the interior space as well for those taller passengers. I will say though that shoulder room isn't too bad. However, I don't think you can squeeze in a third person in the center, most because of the center hump, but also the way the center console is shaped. It will be quite the squeeze, so I would say just stick to 2 people in the back. Now, the Vaganza upholstery does feel quite premium and nice in this vehicle, and you do have a decent amount of bolstering and support in the back. Obviously, this is not going to be a sports crossover, so you'll be swinging around quite a bit, but on those longer road trips, you'll be finding yourself quite comfortable in the back of the X1. Also back here, you will have 2 center-mounted air vents to go along with 2 USB-C inputs. And then to round out the second row seating area, you do get a center armrest with 2 cup holders. And lastly, with the BMW X1, you are going to receive a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, producing 241 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque, and it is paired with a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission. Within the BMW lineup, the X1 most certainly feels like a base model, not only in regards to the interior quality and refinement. You hear that with the interior insulation as well. There is some echoing with the acoustics of this interior. That's the first thing I noticed hopping into this X1 today. But also even in regards to what you have here mechanically, because not only is this built on a different platform compared to the X3, X5, and X7, so it's not on the cluster architecture platform, it also doesn't have the 8-speed automatic transmission from ZF, and that is going to change up the driving experience of this vehicle quite dramatically. Well, the X1 is not going to be a sports crossover, at least in this form, because you'd go with the M35i. One thing I do notice though is that handling is decently weighted, and it does feel rather agile. In the subcompact crossover market, you're comparing the X1 to the Audi Q3, Mercedes Benz GLA, and the Volvo XC40. While a lot of you might think that the BMW X1's closest rival would be within Germany, it's actually from Sweden with that Volvo XC40. Volvo is actually killing it in this market for the luxury subcompact crossover segment. And I think there is a reason as to why, mostly because with the Volvo XC40, it is luxurious, it is upscale, it does feel somewhat refined. And we're going to find this out with the X1, that it doesn't really fall under those categories necessarily. I will say though, that with this Turbo 4, it does feel rather peppy. And under heavier accelerations, I don't find this dual clutch to be clunky at all. With the X1, you're getting a sportier experience. You're getting a more aggressive and enthusiast-focused driving experience that I think does turn on a lot of younger buyers who are looking at purchasing their first ever BMW. For those of you who are seasoned veterans in this market and you want luxury, I would say the X1 does exhibit those qualities, obviously with it being a BMW, but it does have more of a stiffer suspension. It's a more enjoyable vehicle to drive in this market compared to the Q3 and GLA, but it's far from being the most plush. You have a very aggressive steering wheel, which kind of goes hand in hand with this vehicle's driving experience and dynamics. We have aggressive 10 and 2 positions and firm 9 and 3 grips, and it just really sets a tone for what this crossover is all about. I will say though that for a vehicle in this market with the Turbo 4, the powertrain is rather quiet. Now I am hearing a decent amount of road noise, and that goes hand in hand with that echo aspect to the interior, but ride quality wise, going over the bumps and imperfections, it is quite smooth. And we are going to put it in sport mode, because why not? That's what BMWs are made for. And I think that for a lot of people who say the 7-speed dual clutch is clunky, it's not like Volkswagen's dual clutch, I can say that for sure. But I think the X1 can be seen as more of a niche product from BMW, because I think a lot of people do go with the X3. That's the best seller within the lineup. And I do notice in sport mode, the transmission does perk up quite a bit, and that's where the clunkiness does come into play. But aside from the mechanical aspects, and maybe those are seen as cons, because you could say that, well, I'd rather go with an X3, spend the additional, $5,000-$10,000, get a ZF 8-speed automatic, get a vehicle that doesn't have the dual clutch, and you're also receiving a lot more creature comforts and higher quality materials for the interior. But within this segment, compared to the Q3, compared to the Mercedes Benz GLA, I would even throw in the Lexus NX and then of course the Volvo XC40. It has the practicality. What BMW did in this generation is that they upsized it, I would argue, quite a bit. Even though it only gained about an inch in length, an inch in width, and about 2 inches in height, it just feels more like a traditional crossover now. Whereas last generation, I don't want to say it was a lifted hatchback, because that was what the X2 was, but the X1 didn't really feel like a crossover at all. And that's what I think has made this generation pretty successful, because last year was the best year in sales for the X1 in the 2020s, and they might match that for 2024. And I think it's mostly because of the size of this crossover, the practicality, and maybe even the fun factor as well. Well, I have talked in great lengths about the iDrive 9 user interface and the full digital gauge cluster, and that it might create a bit of a learning curve, especially if you are hopping in from an older X1. The technology is most certainly on par with what you have with the Mercedes Benz GLA and Audi Q3. I think it's better than the Volvo XC40. But if you're looking for an affordable BMW that you don't necessarily want to break the bank, you want to spend over $50,000, the X1 is giving you just enough where it keeps you coming back for more so than last generation. Because with 295 pound-feet of torque, that's a sizable increase from last generation. That's about 40 pound-feet of torque more. And even though the horsepower figures are just a marginal increase, you most certainly feel it. What I also love too about this crossover is that for a vehicle under $50,000, it doesn't necessarily feel cheap. I mean, sure, we've already talked about how it's not really on the same level as the X3, but compared to its closest rivals, I really do like it. Obviously, the differences between the cluster architecture platform and Mini Cooper's platform that the X1 and X2 are built on is quite vast, and you notice the rigidity and the quality difference. I think if you're somebody who doesn't want to go all out for an X3, you're still going to have a lot of fun and really enjoy yourself with this vehicle. I would say though that for those of you who don't like the DCT, keep it in normal mode. Don't use sport mode at all. I'm quite numb to this transmission, having daily driven a GTI for almost 5 years, so it doesn't bother me at all. I like the fact that there is some communication between the transmission, the steering input, and the suspension. While some of you might not like that, I think for a lot of enthusiasts or people who now have to be a bit more responsible are most certainly going to like this crossover. It is quite maneuverable and agile, so I don't think you necessarily have to go with the M35i either. Obviously, it would be a more enjoyable and engaging driving experience, but what BMW is giving you here with this powertrain, I think it's more than enough for daily commutes and weekend road trips. All in all, for a subcompact crossover that starts under $50,000, that gives you all-wheel drive standard, a good powertrain, decent amount of technology. Also, I do like the interior quality. I think you're receiving quite a bit. Obviously, you can tack on a lot of optional features and packages here with this vehicle that would then push you over the $50,000 mark. I think at that point you would go with the X3. But within this segment, I personally like the X1 more than the Q3 and GLA. I also like it more than the Volvo XC40. Americans will disagree with me on that, but I like the fact that it feels sportier, more dynamic, and BMW's always been about that, and we see that because the Audi Q3 doesn't give you an SQ3, and then the Mercedes Benz GLA, obviously with the AMG products for that model, it's still a lifted hatchback. I don't care what anyone says, it's a lifted hatchback, so it's going to feel very much like a car. Whereas the X1, and I think for a lot of buyers right now, they're looking for legitimacy in regards to a crossover. They want the interior space, they want the family friendliness that comes with a vehicle of this size, and they're going to receive all of that. Also, this vehicle isn't too bad in regards to fuel efficiency either, so it kind of checks off all the boxes. Obviously, there's going to be people who will complain about the dual clutch. It is what it is. But if you're somebody who has a lot of experience with dual clutches, I think you're going to like it, especially if you just cruise around in the suburbs, you don't drive in the city that often. This is actually a very fun daily driver. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this review for the 2025 BMW X1. If you did, please like, comment, share, and subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys next time.